My partner told me, "You were unreachable." I had to make investment decisions when I returned from my honeymoon to discover $540,000 missing from our client trust funds. My name is Nathan Cooper, 52 years old, certified public accountant with 23 years of forensic accounting experience managing estate and legal settlement funds. I had built Cooper Stevens Accounting into a firm managing $2.3 million in client trust accounts through rigorous GAAP compliance and detailed audit trails that protected both clients and our professional liability. When Bradley Stevens explained that market opportunities during my absence had required immediate action on behalf of our clients, I simply said, "I understand you had to act quickly." What Stevens didn't realize was that my systematic approach to trust fund oversight included automated backup systems that recorded every transaction to my secure email server, creating an unalterable documentation trail that would expose any unauthorized activity during my honeymoon. The conversation took place in our main conference room on Monday morning, 3 days after I had returned from 2 weeks in Italy with my new wife, Amanda Phillips Cooper. We had spent our honeymoon in remote Tuscan villages with limited internet access, exactly as I had planned, for complete disconnection from work pressures. "Nathan, while you were away, several clients experienced time-sensitive investment opportunities that required immediate fund transfers," Stevens explained while reviewing printouts that looked like client portfolio statements. I had been expecting routine portfolio updates after my extended absence, but the numbers Stevens was showing didn't align with the conservative investment strategies our clients had specifically requested. The Morrison estate funds were moved to higher-yield securities that generated significant returns, Stevens continued, pointing to investment reports that showed complex derivative transactions. Mrs. Dorothy Morrison, an 84-year-old widow, had explicitly instructed us to maintain her $180,000 estate settlement in money market funds and government securities. The investment reports Stevens was showing indicated aggressive trading in cryptocurrency and foreign exchange markets. The Henderson legal settlement required diversification to protect against currency fluctuations, Stevens added, referencing another client whose instructions had been crystal clear about risk tolerance. Attorney Robert Henderson had established a $220,000 trust for his disabled son's long-term care, with written instructions that funds must remain in FDIC-insured accounts and conservative bond investments. The reports Stevens presented showed high-risk equity speculation and leverage trading activities. I nodded thoughtfully while reviewing the documentation Stevens had prepared. The investment performance numbers looked impressive, but the timeline inconsistencies were immediately apparent to my forensic accounting background. "Bradley, these trades show execution dates during the second week of my honeymoon, but several clients were traveling themselves and wouldn't have been available for investment consultations." Stevens paused his presentation and looked up with slight irritation. "Nathan, these were time-sensitive opportunities that couldn't wait for extended client consultations. I used the discretionary authority provisions in our management agreements." The response revealed Stevens's fundamental misunderstanding of our fiduciary responsibilities and the specific limitations of our discretionary authority with trust fund accounts. "Our discretionary authority is limited to routine rebalancing within established risk parameters," I replied. "Moving conservative trust funds into cryptocurrency and leveraged trading requires explicit written authorization from each client." Stevens gathered his papers with visible frustration. "Nathan, you've been gone for 2 weeks while I've been managing crisis situations and market opportunities. These decisions generated substantial returns for our clients while you were unavailable in Italian villages." I thanked Stevens for handling client matters during my absence and returned to my office to begin systematic review of all account activity during my honeymoon period. The automated email forwarding system I had implemented before my departure had been sending copies of all transaction notifications to my secure personal server. Even without internet access in remote Italian locations, every wire transfer, investment change, and account modification had been documented automatically. I opened my laptop and began downloading 2 weeks of transaction records that Stevens apparently assumed I wouldn't be able to access or review in detail. What I discovered in the first hour of analysis was enough to make me reach for my phone to call my brother-in-law, criminal defense attorney Michael Phillips. The transaction timestamps showed that Stevens had been systematically transferring client funds to accounts that weren't listed in any of our approved investment options. Wire transfers totaling $540,000 had been sent to cryptocurrency exchanges, foreign trading platforms, and margin accounts that had no connection to legitimate client investment strategies. Michael, I need immediate legal consultation about potential embezzlement by my business partner, I explained during our confidential phone call. I'm seeing unauthorized transfers of client trust funds that may constitute federal crimes. Michael had handled white-collar criminal defense for over 15 years and immediately understood the seriousness of trust fund violations. Nathan, if Stevens was using client money for unauthorized purposes, you're looking at wire fraud, embezzlement, and potentially money laundering charges, he explained. We need to document everything immediately and consider federal law enforcement notification. I spent the remainder of that day compiling comprehensive evidence of Stevens's unauthorized activities while maintaining normal office operations to avoid alerting him to my investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Stevens had systematically exploited my honeymoon absence to transfer $540,000 from 6 different client trust accounts to personal trading platforms where he had been engaging in high-risk cryptocurrency speculation and foreign exchange trading. The forged client authorization documents he had created to justify the transfers contained signature inconsistencies that would be immediately apparent to handwriting analysis experts. Most damaging, Stevens's personal bank account records, which I could access through our firm's financial management system, showed deposit patterns that exactly matched the timing and amounts of client fund withdrawals. Have you ever returned from a personal celebration to discover that someone you trusted had systematically betrayed clients who depended on your professional integrity? Trust fund violations represent the most serious breach of fiduciary duty in professional accounting practice. The systematic evidence I compiled during my first week back from honeymoon revealed that Stevens's embezzlement was far more sophisticated and extensive than his casual explanation had suggested. My 23-year career in forensic accounting had taught me to recognize patterns of financial fraud, and Stevens's activities during my absence displayed every characteristic of premeditated trust fund theft designed to exploit my temporary unavailability. Cooper Stevens Accounting had been built on my reputation for rigorous compliance with trust fund management regulations and comprehensive audit trails that protected clients' assets from both external fraud and internal misconduct. Our client base included estate settlements, legal judgment funds, and special needs trusts that required absolute security and conservative investment management. My specialization in forensic accounting had attracted clients who needed CPA services for complex estate planning, litigation support, and trust fund oversight that exceeded typical accounting firm capabilities. These relationships were built on demonstrated expertise and uncompromising ethical standards that clients could trust with their most important financial matters. Stevens had joined the firm 5 years earlier, after his previous accounting practice had been dissolved due to regulatory compliance issues that he had attributed to overzealous state oversight and unrealistic documentation requirements. His technical skills were solid, but his attitudes toward regulatory compliance and client documentation had always created tension in our partnership. Nathan, your documentation requirements are excessive and create unnecessary administrative burdens, Stevens had complained regularly. Clients want results, not paperwork. We're spending too much time on compliance and not enough time generating returns. I had consistently explained that trust fund management required comprehensive documentation because of the fiduciary responsibilities we owed to clients who couldn't protect themselves from advisor misconduct. Bradley, our clients are elderly widows, disabled individuals, and families dealing with tragic circumstances, I would respond. They depend on us to protect their money with the same care we would use for our own families. Comprehensive documentation ensures accountability and prevents mistakes. But Stevens viewed my systematic approach as obstacles to business growth and profit maximization. He had been pressuring me to streamline documentation requirements and pursue more aggressive investment strategies that would generate higher fee income. Conservative investing and excessive paperwork are holding us back from competing with larger firms, Stevens had argued during our last partnership review meeting. We need to modernize our approach and take advantage of market opportunities. The investment philosophy differences between us had been manageable when I maintained direct oversight of all trust fund activities, but my honeymoon absence had apparently provided Stevens with the opportunity he had been seeking to circumvent our established protocols. The client files I reviewed showed that Stevens had been systematically identifying accounts with substantial balances and absent or elderly beneficiaries who were unlikely to monitor investment activities closely. Mrs. Dorothy Morrison, whose $180,000 estate settlement had been diverted to cryptocurrency speculation, lived in an assisted living facility and relied on monthly statements that Stevens could easily falsify without detection. The Henderson Special Needs Trust beneficiary, 23-year-old Timothy Henderson, who had developmental disabilities, would never review investment reports or question transaction activities that his father had entrusted to our professional management. Stevens had deliberately targeted the most vulnerable clients whose trust fund violations would be least likely to be discovered quickly, giving him time to generate profits that might allow him to replace the stolen funds before anyone noticed the unauthorized activities. But the automated documentation systems I had implemented created comprehensive evidence trails that Stevens hadn't anticipated or understood. Every wire transfer generated automatic email notifications to my secure server. Every investment change triggered compliance alerts that were copied to my personal monitoring system. Every account modification created audit trail entries that couldn't be deleted or modified without my authorization. Stevens had apparently assumed that my honeymoon in remote Italian villages meant that I wouldn't receive transaction notifications or be able to review account activities until weeks after my return. The beauty of the Italian countryside is the digital disconnection, I had told Stevens before departing. Amanda and I want complete isolation from work pressures during our honeymoon. Stevens had taken my comments about digital disconnection as evidence that I wouldn't be monitoring firm activities or receiving transaction alerts during my absence. But the automated backup systems continued operating regardless of my internet access, creating comprehensive records of every unauthorized transaction that Stevens completed during my honeymoon period. The evidence I was compiling showed not just isolated incidents of poor judgment, but systematic exploitation of client trust funds for Stevens's personal cryptocurrency speculation and foreign exchange trading. His personal trading accounts, which I could monitor through our firm's integrated financial management system, showed that he had been using client money to fund high-risk investments that violated every aspect of our fiduciary responsibilities. Stevens had lost approximately $340,000 of client money through failed cryptocurrency investments and leveraged foreign exchange trading that went against him during volatile market conditions in international markets. His attempts to generate profits that would allow him to replace stolen client funds had instead created larger losses that made restitution impossible through legitimate means. The remaining $200,000 in client funds was tied up in margin positions and cryptocurrency holdings that couldn't be liquidated without generating additional losses that would further compromise client account balances. Stevens was trapped in a classic embezzlement spiral, where initial theft had been compounded by desperate attempts to generate returns that would cover the original unauthorized activities. My forensic accounting experience had encountered similar patterns in previous fraud investigations, but this was the first time I had discovered systematic theft within my own firm. The emotional impact was significant, but my professional training focused on systematic evidence compilation and strategic response planning that would maximize client fund recovery while ensuring appropriate legal accountability. Stevens's exploitation of my honeymoon absence had created federal criminal exposure that required careful coordination with law enforcement agencies and regulatory authorities. Have you ever discovered that a trusted partner used your personal celebration as an opportunity to systematically steal from the clients who depended on your professional protection. Partnership trust requires verification through systematic documentation, especially when significant fiduciary responsibilities are involved. Bleco 3. The comprehensive evidence I assembled during my second week of investigation revealed that Stevens's trust fund embezzlement was part of a larger pattern of financial misconduct that extended back several months before my honeymoon. His systematic theft of client funds had been carefully planned and executed, using sophisticated methods designed to avoid detection while I maintained normal oversight responsibilities. My forensic analysis of transaction records showed that Stevens had been conducting preliminary unauthorized activities since March, using small test transfers to identify weaknesses in our monitoring systems and determine which clients were least likely to notice account irregularities. Stevens made 17 small transfers totaling $45,000 during the 3 months before my honeymoon, I documented in my evidence compilation. These test transactions allowed him to refine his methods and identify target accounts for larger thefts during my absence. The pattern showed careful preparation rather than impulsive opportunism. Stevens had been systematically studying our client base, monitoring systems, and compliance procedures to plan unauthorized activities that would maximize his access to funds while minimizing immediate detection. His target selection had been particularly calculated. Stevens focused on accounts belonging to elderly clients, disabled beneficiaries, and trust funds with limited oversight from beneficiaries who couldn't effectively monitor investment activities. The Morrison estate settlement had been chosen because Mrs. Dorothy Morrison was 84 years old, living in assisted care, and relied entirely on monthly statements that Stevens could falsify without immediate discovery. Attorney Robert Henderson's special needs trust for his disabled son represented another ideal target because the beneficiary couldn't review financial reports or question investment decisions that violated the trust's conservative mandate. Stevens had also targeted the Walsh Family Litigation Settlement Fund, knowing that the family was dealing with ongoing medical expenses and would be unlikely to scrutinize detailed investment reports during their crisis period. The technical method Stevens used to facilitate his theft showed sophistication that indicated previous experience with financial fraud schemes. He had created fake client authorization forms using computer software that could replicate letterhead and signature formats. The forged documents provided paper trails that might fool cursory regulatory review while authorizing investment changes that no client had actually approved. Stevens had established personal trading accounts with cryptocurrency exchanges and foreign investment platforms using business registration numbers that appeared legitimate but weren't properly authorized through our firm's compliance procedures. His wire transfer activities used routing codes and account numbers that made transactions appear to be legitimate investment purchases while actually funding his personal speculation activities. Stevens had been preparing this embezzlement scheme for months, I noted in my evidence summary. The systematic nature of his preparation indicates previous experience with financial fraud and sophisticated understanding of detection avoidance methods. But Stevens had made critical errors that my forensic accounting background immediately identified as evidence of criminal intent and systematic deception. His forged client authorization documents contained signature inconsistencies that would be immediately apparent to handwriting analysis experts. The computer-generated signatures showed pixelation and formatting irregularities that proved they weren't authentic documents. The investment report Stevens had prepared to justify his unauthorized activities contained mathematical errors and timeline inconsistencies that revealed their fabricated nature. Most damaging, Stevens's personal bank account deposits exactly matched the timing and amounts of client fund withdrawals, creating irrefutable evidence that he had been diverting trust fund money for personal use. September 14th, Morrison estate account wire transfer of $85,000. Same day, Stevens personal account deposit of $85,000. September 21st, Henderson trust withdrawal of $120,000. Same day, Stevens personal trading account funding of $120,000. The pattern continued through 15 separate incidents where Stevens's personal financial activities directly corresponded with unauthorized client fund transfers. My brother-in-law, Michael Phillips, reviewed my evidence compilation and immediately recommended federal law enforcement notification. Nathan, this evidence shows systematic wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering that crosses state lines through cryptocurrency exchanges and foreign trading platforms, Michael explained. The federal criminal exposure is enormous, and the evidence you've compiled is overwhelming. He connected me with FBI Financial Crimes Unit Special Agent Patricia Chambers, who specialized in investment advisor fraud and trust fund embezzlement cases. Agent Chambers reviewed my preliminary evidence package and immediately recognized the strength of the case against Stevens. Mr. Cooper, your documentation provides comprehensive evidence of systematic trust fund theft with clear criminal intent, Agent Chambers stated. The timeline, transaction records, and pattern evidence would support federal charges including wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The FBI investigation would require careful coordination to preserve evidence while preventing Stevens from destroying records or transferring additional client funds. We need to secure all computer systems, financial records, and trading accounts before Stevens realizes that his activities have been discovered, Agent Chambers explained. The evidence preservation is critical for successful prosecution. But the most immediate concern was protecting remaining client funds from additional unauthorized transfers while building the criminal case against Stevens. Stevens still has access to client accounts and could attempt additional thefts or evidence destruction if he suspects investigation activities, I noted. We need to secure all systems while maintaining normal business operations to avoid alerting him. Agent Chambers recommended strategic evidence compilation, while FBI investigators prepared search warrants and asset freezing orders that would prevent Stevens from accessing client funds or destroying incriminating records. Continue normal business operations while documenting any additional suspicious activities, Agent Chambers instructed. We'll need comprehensive evidence preservation before executing search warrants and making arrests. The federal investigation was proceeding rapidly based on the systematic evidence I had provided, but the timing would be critical to prevent additional client fund theft or evidence destruction. Stevens's sophisticated embezzlement scheme was about to encounter federal law enforcement capabilities that would expose every aspect of his criminal activities while ensuring complete asset recovery for victimized clients. My systematic documentation and forensic accounting expertise had transformed what appeared to be successful financial fraud into comprehensive evidence for federal prosecution. Have you ever compiled evidence so thorough that it transformed your partner's criminal activities into inevitable federal prosecution? Sometimes forensic expertise and systematic documentation provide the tools necessary to expose sophisticated financial fraud and ensure complete accountability. The strategic coordination between my evidence compilation and FBI investigation required careful timing to maximize evidence preservation while preventing Stevens from discovering our activities and potentially destroying records or transferring additional client funds. Special Agent Patricia Chambers had assembled a team of federal investigators who specialized in complex financial fraud cases involving trust fund embezzlement and cryptocurrency money laundering. Mr. Cooper, your systematic documentation has provided the foundation for one of the most comprehensive investment advisor fraud cases our unit has handled, Agent Chambers explained during our coordination meeting. The evidence you've compiled eliminates most of the challenges we typically face in financial crime prosecutions. The FBI team included computer forensic specialists who would secure digital evidence, financial analysts who would trace cryptocurrency transactions, and international cooperation experts who would recover funds from foreign trading platforms. Stevens's use of cryptocurrency exchanges and foreign investment platforms creates jurisdictional complications, but also provides additional evidence of money laundering and conspiracy charges, explained FBI financial analyst David Martinez. The federal investigation strategy involves simultaneous search warrants, asset freezing orders, and international cooperation requests that would prevent Stevens from hiding evidence or transferring funds beyond recovery reach. We need to execute all enforcement actions simultaneously to prevent Stevens from destroying evidence or moving remaining funds, Agent Chambers explained. The coordination requires precise timing across multiple agencies and international partners. Meanwhile, I continued normal business operations while secretly documenting any additional suspicious activities and preparing comprehensive client notification procedures for when Stevens's arrest became public. Nathan, maintaining normal operations while secretly cooperating with federal investigators requires careful balance, my brother-in-law Michael advised. You need to protect clients while avoiding actions that might alert Stevens to the investigation. The challenge was documenting Stevens's ongoing activities without creating suspicion about my unusual interest in transaction details or account monitoring. I implemented additional automated monitoring systems that would capture evidence of any new unauthorized activities while appearing to be routine compliance upgrades. Bradley, I'm implementing enhanced backup systems based on recommendations from our professional liability insurance carrier, I explained when Stevens questioned the new monitoring procedures. The enhanced systems created comprehensive documentation of Stevens's continued access to client accounts and any attempts to modify records or transfer additional funds. During this period, I discovered that Stevens had been attempting to reverse some of his unauthorized transactions by liquidating his personal cryptocurrency holdings and returning funds to client accounts. Stevens is trying to cover his tracks by reversing some thefts, I reported to Agent Chambers. His personal trading records show cryptocurrency liquidations followed by deposits to client accounts that he had previously depleted. But Stevens's restitution attempts were partial and still left substantial shortfalls in multiple client accounts while creating additional evidence of consciousness of guilt. Brennan's attempts to reverse transactions prove that he knows his activities were unauthorized and criminal, Agent Chambers noted. This behavior supports criminal intent charges and eliminates potential defenses about legitimate investment management. The FBI investigation had also identified additional victims beyond our firm's clients. Stevens had apparently been using similar methods to embezzle funds from his previous accounting practice before joining our firm. Stevens's pattern of trust fund embezzlement extends back at least 8 years, reported FBI investigator Thomas Reynolds. We've identified similar unauthorized activities at his previous firm that affected elderly clients and special needs trusts. The multi-jurisdictional investigation was revealing that Stevens was essentially a career financial predator who specialized in exploiting vulnerable clients through systematic trust fund theft. Stevens targets accounting practices that manage estate and legal settlement funds, Reynolds explained. His methods are sophisticated and indicate extensive experience with financial fraud schemes. But Stevens's most serious error had been underestimating the comprehensive documentation systems that my forensic accounting background had created to protect client assets. Most accountants don't maintain the systematic backup and monitoring systems that exposed Stevens's activities, Agent Chambers observed. His fraud succeeded at previous firms because they lacked Cooper's forensic expertise and documentation protocols. The federal prosecution team was building charges that included wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and violation of fiduciary duties under federal investment advisor regulations. Each unauthorized client fund transfer constitutes a separate wire fraud count, explained federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh. Stevens is facing potential charges on over 40 individual transactions totaling $540,000 in embezzled funds. The international cooperation requests had successfully frozen Stevens's cryptocurrency holdings and foreign trading accounts, preventing him from accessing funds that might otherwise be used for restitution or flight from prosecution. Stevens's attempts to hide funds in cryptocurrency and foreign platforms actually created additional evidence and criminal charges, Prosecutor Walsh noted. Money laundering penalties add significant prison time beyond the basic embezzlement charges. The search warrant execution was scheduled for the following week, timed to occur when Stevens would be in the office during normal business hours with access to all computer systems and financial records. We want Stevens present during the search to observe his reactions and potentially obtain spontaneous admissions, Agent Chambers explained. His response to warrant execution often provides additional evidence for prosecution. But the most important aspect of the federal coordination was ensuring complete client fund recovery through asset forfeiture procedures and federal victim compensation programs. Stevens's frozen assets exceed $400,000, which covers most of the embezzled funds, reported asset recovery specialist Linda Thompson. Additional recovery will come through professional liability insurance and federal victim assistance programs. The comprehensive evidence I had provided was enabling complete asset recovery while ensuring appropriate criminal accountability for Stevens's systematic trust fund theft. Federal investigation capabilities combined with systematic documentation had transformed Stevens's sophisticated embezzlement scheme into inevitable prosecution and complete client fund recovery. Have you ever cooperated with federal investigators to expose sophisticated financial fraud that affected vulnerable clients? Sometimes forensic expertise and law enforcement coordination provide the most effective response to systematic professional misconduct. The FBI raid on our office occurred on a Tuesday morning when Stevens was reviewing client files and had no indication that federal investigators had been building a comprehensive case against his systematic embezzlement activities. Special Agent Patricia Chambers and her team executed simultaneous search warrants, asset freezing orders, and arrest procedures that caught Stevens completely unprepared for the scope of evidence that had been compiled against him. Bradley Stevens, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement of client trust funds, Agent Chambers announced as Stevens looked up from his desk in obvious shock and confusion. The search warrant execution involved 12 federal agents who immediately secured all computer systems, financial records, and communication devices while preventing Stevens from accessing or destroying any potential evidence. We have warrants for all electronic devices, financial records, client files, and personal property related to trust fund management activities, Agent Chambers explained as Stevens was read his Miranda rights. Stevens's immediate reaction was denial and confusion about the scope of the federal investigation. There must be some mistake, Stevens stammered. I've been managing client investments according to standard industry practices. Any documentation problems can be explained through normal business procedures, but Agent Chambers presented evidence summaries that immediately revealed the comprehensive nature of the case against Stevens. Mr. Stevens, we have detailed records of $540,000 in unauthorized client fund transfers to your personal cryptocurrency and foreign trading accounts, Agent Chambers stated. The evidence includes forged client authorization documents, fabricated investment reports, and systematic concealment of unauthorized activities. Stevens's face went pale as he realized that federal investigators had comprehensive documentation of activities he thought had been successfully hidden. Your personal bank account deposits exactly match the timing and amounts of client fund withdrawals, Agent Chambers continued. The pattern evidence proves systematic embezzlement over multiple months with clear criminal intent. Stevens actually fainted when agents presented printouts showing his personal cryptocurrency trading records alongside client account withdrawal notifications that proved his systematic theft. The medical response required paramedics to revive Stevens before he could be transported for booking and initial court appearance. Stevens's physical reaction to warrant execution demonstrates consciousness of guilt, Agent Chambers noted. His shock indicates that he believed his embezzlement activities had been successfully concealed. The computer forensics team immediately secured Stevens's workstation, personal devices, and access to all firm financial systems to prevent evidence destruction or additional unauthorized activities. Stevens had been attempting to reverse some unauthorized transactions during the past week, reported FBI computer specialist Robert Kim. His recent activities show additional evidence of consciousness of guilt and knowledge that his actions were criminal. The search warrant execution also revealed that Stevens had been preparing for potential flight from prosecution by researching international banking procedures and countries without extradition treaties. Stevens's computer contained searches for offshore banking, cryptocurrency exchanges in non-extradition countries, and international travel requirements, computer specialist Kim reported. The evidence suggests he was planning to flee with remaining stolen funds. Stevens's criminal defense attorney, Michael Torres, arrived at the office during the search warrant execution and immediately recognized the overwhelming nature of the evidence being collected. "Mr. Stevens, based on what I'm observing here, we need to discuss plea negotiations rather than trial preparation," Torres advised. "The federal evidence appears comprehensive and will be extremely difficult to challenge in court." But Stevens continued claiming that his activities represented legitimate investment management that had been misunderstood by federal investigators. "I was trying to generate higher returns for clients using modern investment strategies," Stevens insisted. "The cryptocurrency and foreign exchange investments were legitimate attempts to diversify portfolios and improve performance." Attorney Torres quickly recognized that Stevens's explanations contradicted the evidence being collected and would be impossible to sustain during federal prosecution. "Bradley, the forged client authorization documents and systematic concealment prove criminal intent," Torres explained privately. "Legitimate investment management doesn't require falsified signatures and hidden account transfers." The client notification process began immediately as federal agents secured all trust fund accounts and initiated asset recovery procedures to protect remaining client funds. "All client accounts have been frozen pending investigation completion and asset recovery," Agent Chambers announced. "Federal victim compensation programs will ensure complete restitution for all affected clients." I began contacting clients individually to explain the situation and provide reassurance about fund recovery while maintaining professional composure despite the personal betrayal by my trusted partner. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm calling to inform you that federal investigators have discovered unauthorized activities affecting your estate settlement account," I explained during the first of many difficult client conversations. "The FBI has frozen all accounts and initiated recovery procedures that will ensure complete restitution of your funds. I want to assure you that comprehensive documentation has made full recovery possible." Client reactions ranged from shock to gratitude for my transparent communication and cooperation with federal investigators. "Nathan, we appreciate your honesty and professional handling of this crisis," Mrs. Morrison responded. "Your systematic approach to documentation apparently protected our interests even when your partner was stealing from us." The media attention surrounding Stevens's arrest was generating additional scrutiny of trust fund management practices throughout the accounting industry. "Federal raid exposes CPA embezzlement of client trust funds," reported the Denver Business Journal. "Systematic documentation enables complete asset recovery and federal prosecution." The positive media coverage emphasized my cooperation with federal investigators and systematic approach to client protection that had enabled comprehensive evidence compilation and asset recovery. Cooper's forensic accounting expertise and documentation systems provided federal investigators with comprehensive evidence that made prosecution inevitable, the article noted. Stevens's bond hearing revealed additional evidence of flight risk that convinced the federal judge to deny bail pending trial. Defendants' research into international banking and non-extradition countries indicates clear flight risk, Federal Judge Patricia Caldwell stated. "The systematic nature of embezzlement and evidence of planning international flight warrant detention pending trial." Stevens would remain in federal custody, while prosecutors prepared charges that could result in decades of prison time, plus complete restitution of embezzled client funds. The FBI investigation had successfully prevented additional theft while securing comprehensive evidence for federal prosecution that would ensure appropriate accountability for Stevens's systematic betrayal of client trust. Have you ever witnessed federal law enforcement capabilities applied to sophisticated financial fraud that exploited vulnerable clients? Sometimes comprehensive documentation and investigative coordination provide the most effective response to systematic professional misconduct. The federal prosecution of Stevens proceeded with unprecedented speed and efficiency due to the comprehensive evidence I had provided and his own documented attempts to conceal systematic embezzlement activities. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh assembled charges that included 43 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and violation of federal investment advisor regulations that carried potential sentences exceeding 30 years in prison. Stevens's systematic embezzlement of client trust funds represents one of the most thoroughly documented financial fraud cases our office has prosecuted, Prosecutor Walsh explained during press briefings. Cooper's forensic accounting expertise and systematic documentation eliminated most of the evidentiary challenges that typically complicate embezzlement prosecutions. The evidence package I had compiled included timestamped transaction records, forged client authorization documents, cryptocurrency trading logs, and bank account records that proved Stevens had systematically stolen $540,000 from vulnerable clients who trusted him with their most important financial assets. Stevens's attempts to hire experienced criminal defense attorneys were complicated by asset freezing orders that had secured his personal accounts pending restitution determination. Stevens cannot access funds for legal representation because those assets are presumptively client property that was illegally obtained, explained asset recovery specialist Linda Thompson. Federal law prioritizes victim restitution over defendant legal expenses. The court appointed federal public defenders to represent Stevens, but their initial case review revealed evidence so overwhelming that plea negotiations became their primary strategy. The documentary evidence against Stevens is comprehensive and irrefutable, Public Defender William Hayes noted. Our focus must be on plea negotiations that minimize prison time rather than challenging guilt on the underlying charges. But Stevens continued claiming that his activities represented legitimate investment management that had been misunderstood by federal investigators and his former partner. I was trying to generate higher returns for elderly clients who needed improved portfolio performance, Stevens maintained during plea discussions. The cryptocurrency investments were legitimate attempts to diversify their holdings and protect against currency devaluation. Prosecutor Walsh presented evidence that immediately contradicted Stevens's claims about legitimate investment activities. Stevens forged client signatures on authorization documents that clients never saw, Walsh noted. He created false investment reports while using client money for personal cryptocurrency speculation that violated every aspect of fiduciary responsibility. The cryptocurrency exchange records revealed that Stevens had been using client funds for highly leveraged speculation in volatile digital assets that lost over $340,000 during market downturns. Stevens wasn't investing client money, Walsh explained. He was gambling with funds belonging to disabled individuals and elderly widows while creating false documentation to hide his theft. The plea negotiations collapsed when Stevens refused to accept full responsibility for systematic fraud and continued attempting to characterize his activities as investment strategies rather than criminal embezzlement. Stevens's refusal to acknowledge criminal intent eliminates most plea bargaining options, Prosecutor Walsh stated. Federal sentencing guidelines require acceptance of responsibility for reduced sentences. Meanwhile, the asset recovery process was proceeding successfully through multiple channels, including frozen cryptocurrency holdings, professional liability insurance, and federal victim compensation programs. Stevens's frozen assets total $420,000, which covers most of the directly embezzled funds, reported recovery specialist Thompson. Additional recovery through insurance and federal programs will provide complete restitution, plus compensation for emotional distress and portfolio disruption. My new independent practice, Cooper Forensic Accounting, was attracting clients who needed specialized trust fund management services from a CPA with demonstrated integrity and systematic documentation capabilities. Nathan's handling of Stevens's embezzlement showed exactly the kind of professional standards and client protection we need, explained new client Margaret Phillips. His systematic approach to documentation and federal cooperation proved his commitment to client interests above personal relationships. The transition to independent practice was proceeding smoothly, as former clients specifically requested continued services from an accountant who had protected their interests during systematic fraud by a trusted partner. We want to continue working with Nathan because his documentation systems and ethical conduct prevented larger losses, noted client Dorothy Morrison. His professional handling of the crisis proved that he prioritizes client protection above everything else. The FBI had requested permission to use my documentation protocols as training materials for financial crimes investigators who needed to understand how systematic record-keeping could expose sophisticated embezzlement schemes. Cooper's automated monitoring and backup systems provide a model for detecting trust fund fraud, Agent Chambers noted. His methods should be adopted by accounting firms managing client assets to prevent similar embezzlement activities. Professional speaking opportunities at forensic accounting conferences were generating additional consulting income, while establishing my reputation as an expert in fraud detection and trust fund protection. Cooper's experience demonstrates that systematic documentation and ethical conduct can transform professional disasters into competitive advantages, observed conference organizer Sarah Davis. Stevens's trial was scheduled to begin in 6 months, but federal prosecutors were confident that the comprehensive evidence would result in conviction on all charges. The documentary proof of systematic embezzlement is overwhelming, Prosecutor Walsh stated. Stevens's own records prove criminal intent and systematic deception that eliminate most defense strategies. The professional liability insurance settlement had provided additional client compensation, while my reputation for ethical crisis management was attracting referrals from attorneys and financial planners who needed trustworthy CPA services. Nathan's response to his partner's embezzlement demonstrated exceptional integrity and professional competence, noted estate planning attorney Robert Martinez. I refer clients to him specifically because his systematic approach prevents the unauthorized activities that have affected other accounting relationships. Stevens' inevitable conviction would provide appropriate accountability, while my ethical response had created professional opportunities that exceeded anything our original partnership could have achieved. The systematic documentation that had exposed Stevens's embezzlement had become the foundation for building client relationships based on transparency, accountability, and comprehensive protection that attracted clients seeking enhanced security for their trust fund management. Have you ever discovered that ethical conduct during professional crises creates opportunities for independent success that exceed anything partnership arrangements could provide? Sometimes, systematic integrity and comprehensive documentation prove more valuable than business relationships based on convenience rather than shared ethical standards. Standing in my new office 18 months after Stevens's conviction and imprisonment, I reflected on how his systematic embezzlement during my honeymoon had inadvertently created the foundation for a practice specializing in forensic accounting and trust fund protection that exceeded anything our original partnership could have achieved. Cooper Forensic Accounting had grown to manage $4.2 million in client assets while generating annual income of $380,000. All built on the systematic documentation and ethical standards that had exposed Stevens's fraud and ensured complete client recovery. The practice occupied 3,200 square feet in a secure office building, with advanced technology systems for automated monitoring, comprehensive backup procedures, and client communication protocols that prevented unauthorized activities while providing complete transparency for every transaction and investment decision. Working with Nathan provides security and oversight that we never experienced with traditional accounting firms, noted long-term client Dorothy Morrison. His systematic documentation and monitoring systems ensure that unauthorized activity would be detected immediately. The client relationships I had preserved through transparent crisis management were generating steady referrals and practice growth based on demonstrated integrity rather than marketing strategies or competitive pricing. We recommend Nathan to other families specifically because his handling of Stevens's embezzlement proved his commitment to client protection above personal considerations, explained client Robert Henderson. His forensic expertise provides the security we need for long-term trust fund management. The specialized services I had developed in forensic accounting and fraud detection were attracting clients from across multiple states who needed CPA services with enhanced oversight and systematic documentation capabilities. Cooper's methods provide comprehensive protection against accounting misconduct while ensuring complete transparency in all financial management activities, observed trust fund attorney Margaret Phillips. His systems address the exact concerns that beneficiaries have about advisor fraud and unauthorized activities. The FBI training programs I conducted for financial crimes investigators were generating consulting income while establishing my reputation as an expert in systematic fraud detection and evidence compilation. Cooper's documentation protocols have become standard training materials for agents investigating trust fund embezzlement, noted Special Agent Patricia Chambers. His methods provide comprehensive evidence collection that ensures successful prosecution of financial crimes. Annual speaking engagements at forensic accounting conferences and professional development seminars were providing additional revenue streams while reinforcing my expertise in fraud prevention and client protection. Cooper's transformation from fraud victim to industry expert demonstrates that systematic integrity and comprehensive documentation create lasting competitive advantages, observed conference organizer Jennifer Walsh. But the most meaningful aspect of my success was the knowledge that Stevens's betrayal had ultimately strengthened rather than damaged my ability to serve clients and protect their financial interests. Stevens's embezzlement taught me that partnership arrangements create vulnerabilities that can't be eliminated through trust or professional relationships, I reflected during a client appreciation meeting. Independent practice with systematic oversight provides the control and documentation that true fiduciary responsibility requires. Stevens's final sentencing had resulted in 28 years in federal prison, plus complete restitution and permanent disbarment from accounting practice, ensuring that he could never again exploit client trust for personal financial speculation. Stevens's systematic embezzlement represented the most serious breach of fiduciary duty this court has encountered, Federal Judge Patricia Caldwell had stated during sentencing. His exploitation of vulnerable clients warrants the maximum possible punishment under federal guidelines. The criminal conviction and professional sanctions had provided appropriate accountability, while my ethical response had created opportunities that far exceeded our original partnership's potential. Stevens's conviction sends clear messages about the consequences of trust fund embezzlement, noted federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh. Cooper's cooperation and documentation were essential to achieving comprehensive justice for victimized clients. The complete asset recovery achieved through federal forfeiture and victim compensation programs had restored 108% of client losses while providing additional compensation for emotional distress and portfolio disruption. Federal recovery programs combined with Cooper's systematic documentation enabled comprehensive restitution that exceeded direct financial losses, explained recovery specialist Linda Thompson. His evidence compilation was essential to maximizing client recovery. The professional reputation I had built through ethical crisis management was attracting clients who specifically sought accounting services with enhanced oversight and systematic fraud prevention capabilities. Nathan's experience with partnership embezzlement provides unique expertise in protecting trust funds from internal misconduct, noted new client Sarah Martinez. His systematic approach ensures accountability and prevents the unauthorized activities that have affected other accounting relationships. My automated documentation systems had evolved into comprehensive client protection protocols that attracted estate planners, attorneys, and families who needed enhanced security for trust fund management. Cooper's monitoring systems provide complete transparency while preventing unauthorized activities, explained estate planning specialist Robert Torres. His methods have become industry standards for trust fund protection and fiduciary oversight. The compliance consulting services I provided to other accounting firms were generating additional income while improving industry standards for client asset protection. Richardson's experience demonstrates that systematic documentation and ethical conduct can prevent embezzlement while providing comprehensive evidence for prosecution when misconduct occurs, noted CPA practice consultant David Kim. Client testimonials emphasize the security and peace of mind that resulted from working with an accountant who had demonstrated integrity under extreme pressure and maintained systematic protection for client interests. Marcus prioritized complete client recovery over his own reputation and business convenience, noted client Elizabeth Hayes. His handling of Stevens's embezzlement proved that he can be trusted completely with our most important financial responsibilities. Looking back on Stevens's systematic betrayal during my honeymoon, I realized that his attempt to exploit my temporary absence had inadvertently created opportunities for professional growth and client relationship development that exceeded anything our partnership could have achieved. Sometimes the most significant professional betrayal creates the catalyst for building better practices and stronger client relationships, I observed during industry conference presentations. The systematic documentation that had exposed Stevens's embezzlement had become the foundation for building a practice model that attracted clients seeking comprehensive protection and enhanced oversight for their trust fund management. Automated monitoring and systematic documentation prevent advisor misconduct while providing clients with complete visibility into their financial management, I explained during compliance training programs. Stevens's 28-year imprisonment provided appropriate accountability for systematic client fraud, while my ethical response had created lasting professional advantages based on integrity and comprehensive client protection. The people who exploit others' personal celebrations for professional gain sometimes end up creating opportunities for their victims to achieve greater success through independent practice and systematic ethical standards. Professional relationships built on systematic documentation and transparent integrity prove more durable and valuable than partnerships based on convenience or operational efficiency. Stevens's embezzlement had ultimately strengthened rather than weakened my position within the accounting profession, while providing the foundation for building client relationships based on demonstrated integrity and comprehensive protection. Have you discovered that systematic integrity during professional crises creates opportunities for independent success that exceed anything partnership arrangements could provide? Sometimes betrayal during personal celebrations becomes the foundation for building better practices based on comprehensive ethics and client protection. If this story of professional integrity and systematic documentation resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button to Revenge Tales with Luke. Share your experiences with partnership betrayal and professional ethics in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's facing similar challenges with professional misconduct and client protection. See you in our next story.